The Columber by Dino Bizzanti, translated by Lawrence Venuti. When Stefano Roy was 12 years old, he asked his father, a sea captain and the owner of a fine sailing ship, to take him on board as his birthday gift. "When I am grown up," the boy said, "I want to go to sea with you, and I shall command ships even more beautiful and bigger than yours." "God bless you, my son," the father answered, and since his vessel had to leave that very day, he took the boy with him. It was a splendid sunny day, and the sea was calm. Stefano, who had never been on a ship, happily wandered around on deck, admiring the complicated maneuvers of the sails. He asked the sailors about this and that, and then gladly explained everything to him. When the boy had gone astern, he stopped, his curiosity aroused, to see something that intermittently rose to the surface at a distance of 200 to 300 kilometers, in line with the ship's wake. Although the ship was indeed moving fast, carried by a great quarter wind, that thing always maintained the same distance, and though the boy did not make out what it was, there was some undefinable air about it which attracted him intensely. No longer seeing Stefano on deck, the father came down from the bridge after having shouted his name in vain, and went to look for him. "Stefano, what are you doing there, standing so still?" the captain asked his son, finally perceiving him on the stern as he stared at the waves. "Papa, come here and see." The father came, and he too looked in the direction indicated by the boy, but he could see nothing. "There's a dark thing that rises in the wake every so often," Stefano said, "and it follows behind us." "Despite my 40 years," said the father, "I believe I still have good eyesight, but I see absolutely nothing." After the boy insisted, the father went to get a telescope, and he scrutinized the surface of the sea in line with the wake. Stefano saw him turn pale. "What is it? Why do you make that face?" "Oh, I wish I had never listened to you," the captain exclaimed. "Now I am worried about you. What you see rising from the water and following us is not some object. That is a columber. It's the fish that sailors fear above all others. In every sea in the world, it is a tremendous, mysterious shark, more clever than man. For reasons that perhaps no one will ever know, it chooses its victims, and when it has chosen, it pursues him for years and years, for his entire life, until it has succeeded in devouring him. And the strange thing is this: no one can see the columber except the victim himself and his blood relations." "It's not a story?" "No, I have never seen it, but from descriptions I have heard many times, I immediately recognized it. That bison-like muzzle, that mouth continually opening and closing, those terrible teeth! Stefano, there's no doubt the columber has ominously chosen you, and as long as you go to sea, it will give you no peace. Listen to me. We are going back to land now, immediately. You will go ashore and never leave it again, not for any reason whatsoever. You must promise me you won't. Seafaring is not for you, my son. You must resign yourself. After all, you will be able to make your fortune on land, too." Having said this, he immediately reversed his course, re-entered the port, and on the pretext of a sudden illness, he put his son ashore. Then he left again without him. Deeply troubled, the boy remained on the shore until the last tip of the masts sank behind the horizon. Beyond the pier that bounded the port, the sea was completely deserted. But looking carefully, Stefano could perceive a small black point which intermittently surfaced on the water. It was his columber, slowly moving back and forth, obstinately waiting for him. From then on, with every expedient, the boy was dissuaded from his desire to go to sea. His father sent him to study at an inland city hundreds of kilometers away, and for some time, distracted by his new surroundings, Stefano no longer thought about the sea monster. Still, he returned home for summer vacations, and the first thing he did as soon as he had some free time was hurry to the end of the pier for a kind of verification. Although he fundamentally considered it unnecessary, after so many years, Even supposing that all the stories his father told him were true, the Columba had certainly given up its siege. But Stefano stood there, astonished, his heart pounding. At a distance of 200 to 300 meters from the pier in the open sea, the sinister fish was moving back and forth, slowly, raising its muzzle from the water every now and then and turning toward land, as if it anxiously watched for Stefano was coming at last. So the idea of that hostile creature waiting for him day and night became a secret obsession for Stefano, and even in the distant city it cropped up to wake him with worry in the middle of the night. He was safe, of course. Hundreds of kilometers separated him from the Columba, and yet he knew that beyond the mountains, beyond the forests and the plains, the shark was waiting for him. He might have moved even to the most remote continent, and still the Columba would have appeared in the mirror of the nearest sea. With the inexorable obstinacy of a fatal instrument, Stefano, who was a serious and eager boy, profitably continued his studies, and as soon as he was a man, he found a dignified and well-paying position at an emporium in that inland city. Meanwhile, his father died through illness. His magnificent ship was sold by his widow, and his son found himself the heir to a modest fortune. Work, friends, diversions, first love affairs. Stefano's life was now well underway, but the thought of the Columba nonetheless tormented him like a mirage that was fatal and fascinating at the same time, and as the days passed, rather than despair, it seemed to become more insistent. Great are the satisfactions of the industrious, well-to-do, and quiet life, but greater still is the attraction of the abyss. Stefano was hardly 22 years old when, having said goodbye to his inland friends and resigned from his job, he returned to his native city and told his mother of his firm intention to follow in his father's trade. The woman, to whom Stefano had never mentioned the mysterious shark, joyfully welcomed his decision. To have her son abandon the sea for the city had always seemed to her, in her heart, a betrayal of the family tradition. Stefano began to sail, giving proof of his seaworthiness, his resistance to fatigue, and his intrepid spirit. He sailed, and in the wake of his ship, day and night, in good weather and in storms, the Columba trudged along. He knew that this was his curse and his penalty, and precisely for this reason, perhaps, he did not find the strength to serve himself